Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Madeleine Evans-Brown. I am the Marketing and Communications Manager here at A2B Assessments. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we proceed. If we can ask everyone to keep their cameras and their microphones turned off. We will be recording this session, so we will be sending a follow-up email for anyone who couldn't attend this session, and also you will have a link to this. So if you have any colleagues who may be interested in the information in this webinar, you can obviously pass this link on to them. We would love to hear from you. For those who aren't familiar with Microsoft Teams, on your bottom right there is a chat box function. If you can click on there throughout the session, if you've got any questions at all, my colleague Isaac Ampofo, who is our Customer Experience Manager, will do his utmost to respond to you as quickly as he can. If we get to the end and there are any questions that are still unanswered, we can carry on and leave this session open for another 5-10 minutes just to make sure your questions are answered. I would like to introduce you to today's presenter. Johnny Walters is one of our experienced assessors. He's been with A2B Assessments for 4 years. I'm going to be sharing an infographic that he's going to talk through. And so without further ado, I'll pass you on to Johnny.
Thanks, Madeleine. Thanks a lot. That's nice introduction. Yeah, 4 years. So I've been an assessor at A2B Assessments now for 4 years. So today, we're just going to be talking about the DSA process. What is DSA? And the main focus and the important area is to make students aware of this. Time and time again, I assess students in their 3rd year at university or their final year, and they have just been made eligible because they didn't even know it existed, or they didn't even know they would be eligible. So there's so much support that they could have had, and maybe that students had to resit a year, resit exams or assignments. So it's really important today to talk about kind of what it is, what it entails, and what kind of support is out there. So what is DSA? Disabled Students Allowance. So it's funding and support from the government for students in higher education, with students with conditions, disabilities that's having an impact on their studies. So today it's just about making sure that students get it sorted early, and make sure that they're aware that it exists. Yeah. So who is eligible? Well, so any student in the UK can apply for Disabled Student Allowance as long as you have evidence to show that you have a long-term illness or health condition. So for example, that would be diabetes or sickle cell, cancer, or HIV, or they have a specific learning difficulty, so dyslexia, dyspraxia, or autistic spectrum disorder, ADHD, that kind of area, and also mental health. So your backgrounds as well, you're probably aware that mental health has been on the rise dramatically over the years for various reasons. So so obviously that will include depression, anxiety, PTSD, schizophrenia, psychosis, all those kind of areas of mental health as well. So that, and then moving into the physical and sensory impairment. So wheelchair users, and a person with chronic pain, or a person with visual impairments or a hearing impairment, that kind of physical and sensory realm as well. But these are just examples. There are many, many more conditions as well. It's very nuanced, you see, as well. So I mean, I saw a student not so long ago, and it's like 1 in 10 million people have this condition. So I obviously had to look it up, do lots of research how it can impact the student, but obviously we find that out during the assessment as well. But yeah, it's very nuanced, and it's not a one box fits all, so to speak. So what does the support cover as well? I mean, again, this varies dramatically as well. So often there's funding toward a laptop and a printer, with assistive technology. So there could be spelling software, note-taking software, dictation software, reading software, all those kind of areas as well. And also moving away from that as well, travel as well. So taxis for physical disabilities, mental health or sensory impairments, ergonomic equipment for physical disabilities, hearing amplification equipment, having a sighted guide for visually impaired or a note taker. Also one-to-one study skills for specific learning difficulties, and one-to-one mentoring as well for mental health. Study skills, yeah, they help with a variety of things, note-taking strategies, written assignments, reading strategies, all those kind of areas, and the mentoring as well, just to make sure that if you have anxiety, depression, or psychosis, or the mental health disability, that you're not getting too overwhelmed about the workload. You're managing your time effectively, and you're reducing stress levels, especially during exam seasons, or when you're trying to meet deadlines as well. So all this kind of one-to-one support, hardware, software, there's so much out there, but it's our job basically during the assessment to find out what does the student need, what works for them, have they tried anything before, are they familiar with some of these softwares, and we'll try to build on that as well. But if they're not, fair enough, we'll introduce them to it and see if that works. It is flexible as well. If something's not working, we can try something else and then recommend something again. I mean, it's not like they have the assessment and then that's it. Something needs adjusting or tweaking or anything like that. We can do that with the right justifications. So we just basically try to tailor that support, to the specific needs of that student. So preparation then. So the student obviously need medical evidence for their condition, so they need to send it into their funding body. So a simple way to get this is you can actually download the student finance medical evidence form online. I think Isaac might be able to maybe just put that in the chat, a link to that. And then you would get a medical professional to fill in that form, and then the student can use that to send it in. Or though, if they have a specific learning difficulty like dyslexia or dyspraxia, it needs to be the full diagnostic report, which is often generated from a psychologist. So that will cover areas such as reading speed, processing, working memory challenges. It will do all those specific tests, and it's quite long as well. Sometimes it can last for 2 to 3 hours, those diagnostic tests. So the application, someone's just joined. This is also my birthday, by the way. I know you can't hear me. Sorry, you can't. I can't hear you. But I just thought it'd be obviously the best thing to do on your birthday is to talk about DSA. So great. So the application. Yes, they need to fill out the DSA application and send their medical evidence to the correct funding body. So Student Finance England, which is often the case. I'm not sure where all of you are coming from, but Student Finance Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, depending where they are in the UK. So the information basically to get the form is on our website, atbassessments.com, or just go onto the Student Finance website as well and just download the DSA form. You can either fill it online through your Student Finance portal, or you can actually just send in a copy via post, hard copy as well. Jan Pickering, happy birthday. Thanks, Jan. Really appreciate it. Basically, yeah, so the DSA, once they process the medical evidence and the DSA form, they will either basically agree to it and say you need to now book your needs assessment, or they may ask for more evidence. So this sometimes happens as well, actually, well, more often than you think. So DSA, they need to know that the condition is long-term and it's going to affect you on a daily basis. Because sometimes doctors just leave that out. So for example, doctors might go, they don't do the student finance form, they just write a letter and they'll say, so-and-so has anxiety, signed off. that might not be enough. They might just say, and it impacts them on a daily basis, and it impacts their studies, and it's long term. Or if it's a physical disability or something like that, it needs to say those specific kind of words. Otherwise, the DSA can actually reject it and prolong the process, which is obviously the last thing the student wants. So I guess actually, in a way, this is why it's more efficient for the medical professional to fill in the DSA medical evidence form, just to speed along processing times, because there is a box that just says, is it long term and does it impact them on a daily basis? And literally the doctor just has to tick it, which confirms that straight away. Good. So booking. So yeah, very easy to book through us. You can book online at the a2bassessments.com on our website, or you can call the head office, and our processing times are pretty quick. We usually get back to students within 2 to 3 days. Or once DSA have processed all the information, they'll get a letter telling them to find their nearest assessment centre, and it will show the actual link of the website of where and how you can do that. Good. So once they basically found their assessment centre, but in their needs assessment, they come to us or someone else, and they have their needs assessment. So it's either face-to-face or video call or by phone. It usually takes about 1 or 2 hours, depending. And what we do, we work with the student. Basically, we have a report to write, and we go through the sections of study in the report. So we cover areas such as reading tasks, written assignments, managing time, exams, presentations, and talk about the challenges there that is related to their condition. So do they have any difficulties in those areas of study, which is condition related? And this is when we recommend support. So this is where we go down the software route or mentoring or travel, taxis, things like that. And we're building up justifications together. So we're working with the student basically to build up justifications, so we can send it to DSA Student Finance to be processed. Cool. Yeah, so the report will involve the types of support that's needed, and it will also include the suppliers as well, so the companies that are providing that support. We'll send off the needs assessment to their funding bodies. If it's Student Finance England, Wales, or whatever, we'll send that off to them to be processed within 10 working days of the needs assessment. And so just make sure that's in the right place. Yeah, so from the assessment, we'll send the report within 10 working days. And we do acknowledge as well that it is difficult. Essentially, you're talking about your difficulties for like an hour or 2 hours. We do acknowledge that, and we basically we do pride ourselves actually just making the assessment as relaxed as possible and not overwhelming, and just being very clear from the beginning. What's the process? Where are they? What's the support involved? And there's a lot of questions that need answering, and I guess the student can sometimes just have not a clue what it is. So it's just our job to very quickly just explain what it is and just put them at ease, and make sure that it's a very it's supposed to be a relaxed process and just a relaxed discussion really. Yeah, so we just make it as student focused as possible. Okay, so when we've sent off the report, it can take up to 20 working days. We send off the report to Student Finance at the DSA department, and it can take up to 20 working days for them to process the report. Yeah, so the whole process usually takes about 4 weeks for them having the assessment, to us writing the report, to us sending it to Student Finance. The whole process usually takes about 4 weeks. So once DSA have processed the report, they'll then send the student an entitlement letter, and then that will have a list of the companies and what the student's next steps are to organize the support that we've recommended. So for example, if it was a student with dyslexia, we'd often recommend equipment, study skills, software training as well for it. There'll be a company with a number for the software trainer, their study skills, their equipment supplier, And it's up to the student to contact those companies to arrange the support. Quite often those companies will just ask for a copy of that letter, just to show evidence that they've got funding from DSA, and they'll just deliver the equipment, and and they'll get taught how to use it, and then they can start using sessions with their one-to-one study skills. There's also a general allowance in there as well, and it's all in the letter when the students can read it. General allowance for ink and paper, photocopying, and things like that they can get reimbursements for. Now, moving forward, so if the student maybe a year later or even a week later just becomes eligible for another condition, yes, it's called a funded review of needs. We can then reassess the student and then add to the support. So for an example, if a student had a specific learning difficulty, and then maybe half a year later they had a new condition like mental health challenges, then we would reassess them. And then we'll just add to the support. So if there's any other support level, we can add in one-to-one mentoring or some more software that can help as well. All depends on the student's needs, of course. So that it doesn't really stop there. And if I see a student in their first year, I am their needs assessor for the whole course duration. So year 1, year 2, year 3, if they're doing medicine, 5 years. And if there's anything that needs tweaking, or if they've got a new condition, we can just reassess them. They will have to send that new condition medical evidence again to DSA just to be made eligible, and then we can reassess them again. Yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. That's basically the whole cycle from beginning to end. I think that's the end of my note. So if there's any questions at all, or Isaac wants to take over.
Hi everyone, thanks for that, Johnny, and happy birthday as well. I know, like you said, this is the best place to be on your birthday, so we appreciate that. So hopefully everyone's found that kind of useful in terms of a bit of an explanation about what Disabled Students is, who can be eligible for it, and how it can support some of the students that you have under your care at the moment. From my understanding, a lot of you guys work in SEN departments in the secondary education at the moment, and it's about connecting those dots with the support that you have right now, continuing into higher education if those students choose to go down that path. So I'm just going to leave kind of maybe a 5 to 10 minutes now as an open forum to kind of ask me any questions, and I haven't seen anyone pop up. Just on cue, Jane, for student with high functioning autism, is there support for living needs? So regarding living needs, that would qualify one of the personal care support. So that's slightly different from Disabled Students Allowance, because that's actually regarding Disabled Students Allowance discusses the impact needs of a condition on the study-related needs. So personal care and living needs normally get taken up with the Higher Education Institute. So it's a slightly different support system on that one. In that case, Jane, what would happen is we would advise the student to speak with their disability team at the university they're attending to see what individual amendments they could make with that student. But there is sort of an accommodation support that is supplied and funded by the Disabled Students Allowance, but it's quite a complicated one in terms of that discussion, as Johnny will attest to. Accommodation is a bit of a grey area when it comes to Disabled Students Allowance, as they don't necessarily like to fund for it. But yes, there is support for high functioning autism students. However, it's got to be tailor-made to students' needs regarding study, not necessarily their living requirements. So it's a slightly different funding source, which wouldn't fall under the Disabled Students Allowance. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, it's usually like personal independence payment as well for general living or mobility as well. But yeah, that's not an area of support that's funded by DSA. As Isaac said, it's all study related. So if it's living that's outside the academic study realm, it's not something they would cover.
And just on this follow-up question here from Hannah, does the DSA assessment recommend support for their HE providers to provide exam allowances, colour paper, etc.? If so, is it the student's responsibility to let the unique college know? So with regards to that, that would fall under the higher education remit on that one. So that would fall under the reasonable adjustments side of things. So when we're assessing a student, we're discussing the type of assessments they have, be it examinations or if they have deadlines, etc. And if a student does have difficulty either attending examinations or actually organising their time management, we would make a recommendation for a reasonable adjustment, but that has to come from the HEI. So it's something that we would recommend. However, it's up to each individual HEI to make that final decision on that one, as it's not something that we can influence, but we would normally recommend it if a student did have that sort of need. But every university has their own kind of reasonable adjustments criteria, so to speak, for individual students' needs. And that's why we really do encourage students to get in touch with their student support team or disability team at the university to ensure that it's quite transparent in terms of the DSA support they receive, as well as the reasonable adjustments that the university can provide as well. No worries. Is there any financial support to cover the cost of the full diagnosis report? Karina, on that one, is that the diagnosis report for the learning difficulties such as dyslexia? Are you talking about the actual the assessment itself? Because the assessment cost comes out of the students disabled students allowance, so there's no cost from the students end regarding that. But in terms of the actual learning difficulties, so in terms of an educational psychologist assessment carried out, it's a bit of again, there's no support available from the DSA, but generally a lot of HEIs have a hardship fund which can cover the cost of those because I appreciate they are quite expensive. So it's best for the student to reach out to the HEI to see if they have an in-house team to actually carry out that assessment prior to coming in. If a student has had an educational psychologist report prior to them attending university, that's absolutely fine as well. Student Finance now accepts medical evidence from a student regarding specific learning difficulties pre-16. So if they had a report when they are sort of 10 or 12 years old, that could actually count as medical evidence, and that could be used so the student wouldn't have to go for it again. However, in terms of the funding available for that, it would be best to reach out to the actually HEI itself and see if there's actually a hardship fund, or if they actually do those assessments in-house, because some universities do have a team to actually diagnose dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc., and other learning difficulties that a student may have. So hopefully that's, you're welcome. Okay, Jess, brain condition, how doctors are unaware it's long term. I'm not all eligible. So on that one, Jess, what I would suggest is essentially asking your doctor. It sounds like this most likely would impact you on a day-to-day basis. So I'd ask your doctor to actually put that up in writing in a GP letter to send it into the Disabled Students Allowance team and have them review it. I think it's something you could just certainly discuss with your GP in terms of the day-to-day difficulties that you may face as a result of that brain condition, and they could put that in their report, and then you could submit that. I would like to say that would 100% be supported by the Disabled Students Allowance, just from the students I've seen with brain conditions in the past. And it's best to go back to your GP and actually go through that process with them themselves to discuss how it impacts you on a day-to-day basis, and then they can send that medical evidence, you can send that medical evidence on to your funding body, and when you're applying for the Disabled Students Allowance, and you should be able to get approved for that. And if they do come back and ask for more, then essentially you can actually answer their questions and go again. When Student Finance do ask for more evidence, they generally ask for more detail in terms of how it impacts you on a day-to-day basis. Like Johnny said earlier, that's something that's quite key and critical, having that area saying, does this impact me on a day-to-day basis? After we've had this webinar, guys, I will send a link to the medical evidence, the actual DSA form, so you can all check it out for yourself. It's quite a long document, however, it is quite comprehensive in terms of what you need to submit when applying for Disabled Students Allowance. So that might help you out and give a bit more context to what I'm saying. But hopefully that answers your question, Jess. But if not, please just ping me another message. You're welcome. And also, guys, if there's anything that you don't think of right now, we're an open source to contact as well. After this, you'll have our email addresses, so you can always contact us afterwards. But if there's anything else that anyone has any kind of questions or queries about, please feel free to kind of ping them over in the chat. Or if you're really feeling adventurous, there's a hand button in the middle of the screen on the bottom end, you can just go over that, and we'll kind of do a bit of more of an interactive session that way. Okay, no worries. Fantastic. In that case, what I'll do is I'm going to hand over to my colleague Madeline now in a second. But thank you everyone for attending. And like I said, if you do have any follow-up questions that come up, oh, hold the mic. Hold the mic. Everyone pause, sit down. Nielsen, sorry, yeah, what's your question, please? If your mic's off on mute, Nielsen, you might want to. Okay, cool. There we go. Students are in sixth form. Do they need to reapply? Okay. So yes, the short answer is yes. So if a student is in sixth form and they haven't already applied for the DSA, they can apply for it at 17 when they're 17 years old, and that gets the ball rolling straight away. And essentially, the sooner you apply for DSA, the better, because student finance processing times can be quite long. So the sooner you apply, the better it is. In terms of reapplying, I think a student who's in sixth form probably wouldn't have already applied for disabled students already. So I always advise students who are coming into their second form. So the sixth formers aren't eligible, no. It's for higher education on this one. So disabled students allowance is for any student studying a level 4 course and above. So that can be a foundation course at university or an undergraduate to postgraduate, as well as PhD. It's a slightly different funding source for PhD students, but it's generally higher education that the disabled students allowance is for students there. So hopefully that answers that question. For sixth formers, I believe, from my experience working in schools, that some schools do have an SEN department to actually help out with that one. And what we tried to do is actually match up previous support that a student may have received during their time at school with what disabled students allowance will fund. So we'll try and match those together. But in answer to your question, are sixth formers not eligible not to actually receive the support? They can apply at that time, but they won't be able to receive the support because they're currently not studying at higher education. No worries. Good question, Hannah. So students don't need to reapply every year. The disabled students allowance rolls over. So if your course is 3 to 4 years, those recommendations will be made to cover the whole time for that course duration. So the student doesn't need to reapply. If the student were to have a break from study, that's a slightly different circumstance. They would have to update the funding body that they're actually having a break from study, and then there may be some adjustments made when they return. However, if they're going to continue their course all the way through, then that's DSA support rolls over each year. So that's from the non-medical helpers support that Johnny discussed earlier, the study skills, the mentoring, etc. But as well as the warranties and insurances that cover their equipment, their software, maybe their ergonomic support that they may have. So that rolls over each year for that one. So the student does not have to reapply for DSA each year. No worries. Tim Shehu, I can see you've got your hand up. I'm not sure if that's an error or if you're just trying out that button, but have you got any questions at all? Nope. Okay. Fantastic. Has anyone else got any questions at all before we kind of close off today? Okay, great. In that case, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Madeline now to just kind of conclude everything. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, everyone, for your time in joining us in this webinar. Big thank you to Johnny, and big thank you to Isaac for answering the questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, there will be a recorded link available. We will be sending a follow-up email with that link, so you have that available for any colleagues, and we'll also add that link that Isaac mentioned earlier on for your information. As we said, any questions, please just pass them over and we will help you if you come up with any webinar. Again, thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.